Our reading for today comes out of 1 Peter, way at the end of the Bible. Some of these little letters don't get a lot of airtime, so I thought it'd be nice to pluck a little bit out of here, and some of the stuff might possibly sound familiar. So I, as usual, expanded the reading a little bit just to get a better feel for what's going on. So I will be looking at chapter 3, verses 8 through 22. Finally, all of you have unity of spirit, sympathy, love for one another, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or abuse for abuse, but on the contrary, repay with a blessing. It is for this that you were called, that you might inherit a blessing. For those who desire life and desire to see good days, let them keep their tongues from evil and their lips from speaking deceit. Let them turn away from evil and do good. Let them seek peace and pursue it, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now, who will harm you if you are eager to do what is good? But even if you do suffer for doing what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear, and do not be intimidated, but in your hearts sanctify Christ as Lord. Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and reverence. Keep your conscience clear, so that when you are maligned, those who abuse you for your good conduct in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if suffering should be God's will, than to suffer for doing evil. For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, that the righteous for the unrighteous, in order to bring you to God. He was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and made a proclamation to the spirits in prison, who in former times did not obey, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah, during the building of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were saved through water. And baptism, which this prefigured, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, with angels and authorities and powers made subject to him. So this letter, 1 Peter, is probably written somewhere in the 80s or 90s. So shortly after our Gospels of like Matthew and Luke, roughly contemporaneous with Revelations, but maybe a little bit earlier. Part of knowing that comes from the fact that he just straight up quotes from a number of Paul's letters and from some of the gospel materials. And so it is certainly a pseudonymous letter, but it was written, if you go to the beginning, to a number of churches in what would today be Turkey, the sort of region just north of Israel and that, but before you get all the way over to like Greece, which was a major growth spot for Christianity in the first century. Paul spends tons of time there. A lot of the big names of the New Testament spend a lot of their times in this region because they were proving very successful there. And this letter is responding to what is clearly some kind of difficulty that is being experienced by these communities. A lot of historical scholars have tried to link this with the actual persecutions under Domitian or Diocletian or even Nero. But if you very carefully look at this and you look at the time frame, it's probably not active, murderous persecution. It is not largely people being thrown into prison or executed. This area at this time experienced a lot of social pressure. As people converted, and their life as a Christian meant that they were expected to live a different way, it created a lot of drama in families, among friend groups and neighbors. And so a lot of what they're experiencing is not violent persecution per se, so much as social exclusion, which is why it's a lot of being maligned and insulted and spoken ill of and lied about and whatnot. And which we also know because 20 to 30 years after this, we have this famous letter from Pliny the Younger, who became governor of this general region. And he writes to the emperor saying, we have all these people out here called Christians that are being brought before me, and people are looking for them to be executed because they're terrible people apparently, but I did an investigation and I don't know, they're just kind of annoying. What should I do with them? And the emperor's response is basically, if they're just mildly being a nuisance, just let them go. Like, beat them a little and send them on their way. That's not a capital offense. If they commit some real kind of crime, then sure, do away with them. So even 20 to 30 years later, they weren't facing government-sponsored persecution or anything. But people didn't like them for a number of reasons. When they were executed, and they were at times, and certainly there were mobs that went after them in various communities, the number one thing that they get executed for, from Nero on through all the persecutions until the fall of the Roman Empire, the charge against Christians, against us, is always sedition and treason, because Christians refused to pledge their allegiance to the empire, right? Their allegiance, if Jesus is Lord, then Caesar is not. And that, by Roman standards, was sedition and treason. Roman culture struggled with a lot of the ideals of Christianity, because Roman culture was overwhelmingly about hierarchy. It's about everybody staying in your lane. We don't group together. There's not a lot of group gatherings that aren't public holidays. So you don't get together with your neighbors for meals. If it isn't a major public festival, you just stay in your thing. All the rich people stay over here with all their rich friends, and all the poor people stay over here and do their own thing, and never those shall meet. You had strict hierarchies between husbands and wives, and parents and children, and masters and slaves, and all of these very rigid structures that Christianity kind of messed with early on, a lot, because our gatherings were a wide range of people. There were handfuls of wealthy homeowners that were hosting the churches, right alongside prostitutes and day laborers and all kinds of people from the street. And Romans really, and worst of all, the number one kind of social accusation, not the thing that got Christians killed per se, but the things that gave everyone else in the Roman Empire a bad taste in their mouth, is we were atheists. We only asserted one God. What about all the other gods? They needed their just desserts too. Christianity, this is literally the word that Romans use, is we are atheists because we did not recognize or pay homage to all of the other gods out there. And so Roman culture, which is very strong in that region that is now Turkey, that was very popular as a retirement place for people coming out of the legions. So Italy itself had been sort of established for a long time, and all the major patron families kind of had their farms. So if you served in the legion and you survived your career and got to retire, they'd usually give you a plot of land somewhere in Greece or Turkey or those kinds of regions. So these were a lot of retired military veterans and colonies dedicated to people who were very major imperial supporters. Did not like those early Christians mixing things up too much, stirring those pots. So they were thus maligned, insulted, excluded, bullied. They were being bullied. in pretty extreme social fashion. So we get letters like this, and there's several different letters kind of in this time period, in this tone, saying, hey, we have to somehow figure out how to live in this context. How do we respond when people are going out of their way to be mean to us for no real good reason? So we get this list of wonderful stuff, right? What do? Well, we respond with a tender heart and a humble mind. We repay their evil and abuse with blessing. We hold our tongues and don't say things we don't need to say. We seek peace with them. We behave with gentleness. And we suffer for doing good. That's what we do. That's how we are to respond when the world behaves against us. That is not the typical way of responding to when you look at the news, when people are slighted or anything, do people just say, okay, I'll just accept that and handle you know, all the billboards, you could be owed money, call this law firm to get somebody sued for something, right? We live in a society that believes in a very different kind of justice than what this group provides. Because largely, we, like the majority of Roman culture at the time, looked at justice as about trying to equal things out, right? You did this to me, so we do this thing back to you. And eventually, an eye for an eye makes everyone blind, and all those fun quotes we've heard. That isn't what we're being told to do. How do we handle being insulted, looked down to mean? Well, we go out of our way to be nice to them. Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. How can I help? Or sometimes we just shut up, right? We just hold our tongue. Because we're not going to win. We're not going to, even if we win, we often lose. We can prove that we are justified in some kind of retribution, no matter how small it may be. But at no point is that going to make that other person feel like we were actually in the right. At no point is that going to make that person feel that they weren't justified in what they did. And at no point is that going to make us look like the better person in the conflict. We're called to be the bigger people. That's not fun. That's really hard to do at times. But that is what we are called to do. And it sure isn't how the very vocal public Christians that we often hear about to do things, is it, right? All of your TV evangelists and the people that lead all the major political Christian political organizations out there who are very loud and are very much about getting in the way of things and cluttering up the wheels. I would not describe them often as gentle and willing to hold their tongue, as people who are insisting upon these things, a tender heart. People are angry. This is a side of all of this. This is not even necessarily a Christians versus anyone else thing. People are angry nowadays, aren't they? Does it just feel like everyone in the world is angry for some reason or another? I'm not that old. I acknowledge that. But even I don't remember feeling like everyone was angry all the time through my whole life. And it just feels like something is going on, and everyone is upset about everything. And so everything becomes justified. All these terrible things are happening, so I get to do terrible things back because it's all terrible. We don't. Sorry. I'm not saying you can't be angry about things. I'm not saying anger is not a natural human emotion and is never appropriate at times. But this just generic blanket anger is so tempting, because anger makes you feel powerful. Anger makes you feel righteous. But acting out of that anger does not make you righteous. Acting angrily does not follow the Sermon on the Mount. Those are not, and there is no Beatitudes about yell at people angrily so that they know how you feel about everything and you can prove them wrong. It's not in there. Sorry. Nope. We get stuff like this. We get the need to be of a tender heart, not a hard heart, not turning the other way. It hurts. We got to deal with it. A humble mind. Humility is not number one on most people's lists these days. We all know we're right? All the time. We are to repay evil and abuse with blessing. So when people are mean to you, be extra nice back. Not fake nice. That's a thing, right? Not oh bless your heart nice, right? We all know what that is like. Be nice. There is no telling why they are doing these things, but win them over. Hold your tongue, seek peace, behave with gentleness. And if it comes down to it, and we have no other choice, then we suffer for doing good. Doing good. Not being right. We suffer for doing good. There is a difference. We suffer for doing good. So, in a world where I at least don't feel like the majority of people are living out life this way, I don't see it. I see a lot of anger and people making power plays and not a lot of gentleness and humility. It is our turn collectively to try and bring the temperature down a little in our discourse, to bring things down a little bit in the vitriol that gets thrown around. Be nice to people. Hold your tongue if it's not going to help the situation. Don't necessarily feel the need to defend yourself personally all the time, because you're not going to win, even if you do. Accept it and move forward, because we do need to be prepared to, I do like this line, to always be prepared to give an accounting for the hope that is in you. The hope. Hope. Not the fear, not the anger, not the correctness, not any of that, for the hope that is in you. You don't need to justify your anger. You don't need to have an accounting for why. You don't need to be prepared to explain why you're angry or why things need to be a certain way. You need to be prepared to defend the hope that is in you. This world needs a lot of hope. It needs hope more than it needs a lot of other things that we tend to get focused on. So, however it is you need to focus yourself on these things, all of us need to do our best to attempt to bring down the heat, the vitriol, the anger that we are surrounded by, to accept our own, I don't want to use, to accept the same feelings of exclusion and bullying and everything else that the people involved in this probably felt, and instead be prepared to defend our hope above all else. Amen. In context of that, of defending